It's an invitation to change your life, calling you to see the truth.
That says Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be upon you. Wishing peace for all of you. Large. The topic of this program is basically an introduction to Qur'an, and we're gonna go through meaning and what's the definition of it, and then the history of Qur'an, how the Qur'an was revealed and how it was collected and compiled, and then how the Qur'an is organized and how the organization is based on certain units, what are the main units of forming the Qur'an. And then what are the topics of the Qur'an, what are the main topics of Qur'an, the contents. And what is the purpose of Qur'an. How is the relationship of Qur'an explained with other scriptures, such as Bible and others. How unique the presentation style of Qur'an is compared to other scriptures or human books in general. And then some sciences of the Qur'an. One science would be the translations of Qur'an, and then the explanation of Qur'an or commentaries of Qur'an, tafsir, and then the scientific knowledge in the Qur'an, that's how Qur'an includes some knowledge about science that has been only discovered recently by scientists, and it was mentioned 1400 years ago that you would wonder, and how could such information come into a book 1400 years ago? Is that enough? Do you want to know any more? Any other topics that you have in mind that you want to know about Qur'an that we can include? All right. You all can read? Is it for all of you is clear? Should we turn off this light here, or it's okay? Okay. So before we start, first of all, as a disclaimer, that this presentation is a very brief and a very high-level intro to Qur'an, because the Qur'an has so much details and so much information that you just want to know everything about the Qur'an. It could take a full semester and more to learn about the Qur'an. So we're going to just touch on certain topics of it as we went through. And then I'm going to, of course, share the viewpoints of Islam about this book and the understanding of Muslims from this book, how Muslims have understood this book. And sometimes when I refer to Muslims, sometimes there may be some differences of opinion about some details of this, some aspects of Quran. So if there is a difference, I will mention the differences. Otherwise, I will express the general opinion and the position of our scholars. Is that clear? Okay. Now, what is the Quran? The word Quran has a special meaning. In Arabic, every word has a very direct meaning to its root. And the root is the basis of many words, and that explains a lot of things. So in Arabic, whenever you hear a word, try to find the root and try to find the connections. That already gives you a lot of knowledge. So the word Quran linguistically comes from a verb called qara'a. Qara'a means read or recite. So the word Quran means basically a reading or a recitation. Also, it can mean to read or to be read. To be read, something to be read. So it's interesting. Whenever you see Quran says, I'm to be read. Don't just look at me, read me. That's very interesting. The title of the Quran tells you, read me. And based on that, since the Quran focuses so much on its reading, so we can say that it is the most ever read book on the earth. The most ever read book on the earth. How? Because Muslims have been reciting Quran in every minute and second of time for the last 1400 years by millions of people. So at every second of time, millions of people are busy in reading the Quran. Do we know how that happens? With their daily prayers. Muslims offer daily prayers. They are required to pray 5 times a day. And because of the change of time zones across the earth, so some Muslim countries are offering a prayer. And in the prayer, they have to recite Quran. So aside from reading Quran separately, everybody has to recite Quran in the prayers. So at any time, millions of people are offering prayers and reading Quran. So there is no second or minute because of change of time zones. For example, now some countries are praying, the noon prayer. Some countries are praying the early morning prayer. Some countries are praying the night prayer. So they are all reading Quran. And for the last 1400 years, this has happened. And that really makes it the most ever read book. Also, it's the most memorized book. No book with the size of Quran in the country, in the world, you can find. That, to give you an idea of Quran, these days most of the prints of Quran printed in about 600 pages. So 600 pages of a book that has been memorized cover to cover, page by page, and line by line, and word by word. That is very unique, that there are thousands of memorizers of Quran in every city, every village, every country, and hundreds of thousands of reciters of Quran at every generation, we could say, and all along the history of Islam who have memorized. And our beloved brother Asim, who just recited for us beautifully, he's one of the memorizers of Quran, who has memorized the whole Quran cover to cover. So, imagine how this book has been uniquely, prepared that people can easily memorize it, and even kids in the age of 6 and 7, usually, and 8, they finish the whole Quran and they memorize. And we have many of these such kids here in this area, Herndon, Sterling, and Adam Center, that they have memorized the whole Quran. And they memorize it in a graphic way, so they can tell you, I'm now on this line, and I'm in the middle of the page, I'm in the bottom, I'm in the top, I'm in the side, line by line. And now, what is the definition of Quran? We may see different definitions, but a short and a very brief definition of Quran is the word or speech of God revealed to Prophet Muhammad in Arabic language. So it is the word or speech of God, that's one key element, and it's the one which has been sent to Prophet Muhammad, because the word of God has been sent to Jesus, to Moses, to others also before, and in Arabic language. So in a definition, you want to have the minimum number of words to cover the most essential parts of it. So this is the minimum number of words to cover the most essential parts of it. In Arabic language. So basically, when we say Quran, we are referring to the Arabic text. Quran only refers to the Arabic text. And in Islam, there is a huge difference between the original text of Quran and its translations. In other religions, like for Bible, people don't distinguish between the Bible original or the translations. Whether it's Greek translation or English or Latin, we just call it Bible, right? But in Islam, it's a big mistake to say that this is Quran, which is not an Arabic text, and it's the translation. Why? Why such a difference? Because Arabic text is the verbatim, literal text of God, word of God, according to Islam and Muslims' understanding, that this God sent word by word, and the Arabic text has been revealed and brought by an angel. So that's very unique and different from human language. While translation is the understanding of a human being, the words that have been chosen by the translators. So there's a huge difference between the two, because human beings, when they translate even if they are very faithful and honest, they would try their best based on their own understanding of Quran. They will translate it, and maybe their translation is good at that time. 10 years later, 20 years later, it will not be as good, or languages sometimes change in the language of translation. Sometimes science and technology and knowledge advances and the words change its meaning. Sometimes human beings make mistakes, and so translations are always subject to distortion. So for Muslims, it's a huge an important there's a huge and important difference between the Quran and the translations of Quran. So the translation is always subject to distortion and loss of spirit and loss of impact, and that the Arabic text has. So to develop a deep knowledge of Quran, everyone is recommended to learn the Arabic language, the language of the Quran. However, that's not required for everybody to start learning the Quran, as long as there is an authentic translation, and anybody can start to get the message of Quran. And most of the Muslims across the world who are not Arabs, they depend on translations. So as long as there's an authentic translation, it's good to start with. But if really they want to become real serious students of Islam, then they need to learn the Arabic language, the original language. Is this clear? The difference between Quran and its translation? Now, how was Quran revealed? The first revelation of the Quran took place around, in terms of time, about 620 Common Era, so about 620 years after Jesus' time. And Prophet Muhammad at this time is at the age of 40, and one day he was in the cave doing kind of meditation, that he received an angel all of a sudden, and the angel gave him the first few verses of Quran. We're going to say a few more words about the Prophet in the next slide, but these are the very first words of Quran that came to Prophet Muhammad, that said, read or recite or proclaim with the name of your caretaker who created everything. He created human from a clinging substance. Read, and your Lord is the most gracious, who imparted knowledge by means of the pen. He taught man what he did not know. So basically, God told Prophet Muhammad to start reading or start anything with the name of your caretaker, referring to God, and the one who has created everything, who's the creator of this universe. And he created human being from a clinging substance, which is referring to the initial state of zygote in the womb of the mother, in the initial days of pregnancy of the mother. So from that state, and then referring to the generosity of God and grace of God, that out of grace He is sending guidance to humanity. He has sent prophets, Moses, Jesus, Abraham, and books to humanity. This is really a grace of God. Out of His grace, He's doing it again, and who has imparted knowledge by means of the pen. So He has created pen and all these tools of knowledge that human beings have passed to each other through the pen, based on their own knowledge and experiences and what they could acquire. But beyond that, some knowledge that they cannot acquire themselves, that God sends to humanity and answers some of the fundamental questions of life that human beings cannot answer those questions. For example, what's the purpose of life? Why I am created? And what is inside me? Anything else other than my physical body? Anything is around me other than what I see? So all those other realities of life have been explained by God himself to humanity, so that they are always smart and aware and understand what to expect in this life and after that. So God says that through the pen, basically He has given this knowledge, and human beings have maintained that knowledge, and additionally He has sent this. And also the pen is what He would also write these verses and make it a book later. After this first revelation, the revelations continued after a little while. Then the second revelation came, and then the third revelation came, and revelations continued for the next 23 years. So the prophet was 40 at this time, and until the age of 63, before he died, he continued to receive revelations of Qur'an. And it is interesting that Qur'an was not given like a full book to the Prophet Muhammad. It was revealed in piecemeal and mostly based on the needs of the Prophet and needs of the community, so that Qur'an will be relevant to people's life, so that it will be related to everybody's issues that they are facing, and it could be basically the news of the day. And everybody was waiting, okay, what's next? Okay, the new revelation came. And even those people who were opposing the Prophet, they would ask about it. Okay, what is new? Well, we received now a few more verses, 4 or 5 more verses, or 10 verses. And everybody will learn it. Everybody will talk about it. And that way it was much easier to learn the Quran by the initial recipients for within 23 years instead of a full book coming to him, to the Prophet. And when the Quran was revealed, the Prophet could have been in different situations, sometimes at home, sometimes outside, sometimes traveling, sometimes at night, at daytime. In different kind of circumstances, the Prophet would receive, and sometimes a few verses, sometimes a full page, sometimes a full chapter, sometimes a few lines, and the Prophet would continuously receive for 23 years. Now, to get a little better understanding, before that, all of the revelation came in a speech form. So the revelation was not given to Prophet Muhammad in a written form. The angel would come and recite, and the Prophet would repeat and repeat until he has memorized the whole thing. Then the angel would disappear, and the Prophet would dictate it to others. And that will be explained further in the next few slides. So the recipient of this book is Prophet Muhammad. Who's Prophet Muhammad? To give you an idea quickly, we have very little time, but I'll try to be as brief as possible. Prophet Muhammad, in terms of genealogy, is one of the descendants of Abraham, the same Abraham who is considered the father of monotheism or monotheistic faiths, and he's the one who the Jews and Christians, they all relate to. Abraham had 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael. So from Isaac, all prophets up to Moses and Jesus comes, and from Ishmael, the other son of Abraham, Prophet Muhammad comes. So Prophet Muhammad is also one of the descendants of Abraham. And Prophet Muhammad was born as an orphan. When he was born, his father was already dead while his mother was pregnant. And also he didn't spend much time with his mother. At the age of 6, his mother died, and then so he had no brother, no sister, no father, no mother. And he grew up with a very tough life in early ages, and he was transferred from hand to hand. First, and after the mother died, in the hand of grandfather this, after 2 years dies, then the uncle becomes a caretaker. A very tough life. And he grew up, and he worked as a shepherd in the teenage life, basically, and he started to help and serve people around in the community so much that he became very popular, and he was so trustworthy and helpful to everyone that he was given a special nickname. His nickname was Trustworthy Honest Man. So after that, people would call him with this name, not with Muhammad. They will call him, oh, you are talking about the trustworthy, honest man. He became so popular in the hearts of everybody. He was the first one to reach and help anybody who needs help. Any widow, any child, any elderly, and anybody around the village or city that he would hear about, he would go and help. And people would put their treasures with him, because those days there was no bank, and people would trust him more than the people can trust the bank. And it's interesting that he did not know how to read and write. He did not know how to read and write until the end of his life. He was never taught. And and in this Qur'an, when it was revealed to him, that's why it did not come in a written form. It came in a verbal form by the angel, and the Prophet just dictated to others, and they wrote it down. And he himself could not read and write until the end of his life. So he had never read any book in his life. He had never written anything in his life, and that's also brings to question that from where he got all this information if it was not coming from angel. In his late 30s, he started to meditate. See, what was the religion of Prophet Muhammad? Prophet Muhammad did not have any religion per se. He basically kept his nature pure. According to Islam, every human being comes to this world pure, free from sins, and in the state of submission to God. Every baby, no matter who are the parents, the child is born in a pure state. And now, depending on the environment of the house, the child the faith of the person either becomes stronger and stronger, or it becomes weaker and weaker and eventually suppressed, depending on the parents and siblings and all that. So Prophet Muhammad, he kept his original nature pure, and he was not affected by anything. The society were pagans mainly and worshippers of statues, but he kept his nature pure, and God also protected him with additional measures that he doesn't participate in any kind of wrongs or sins or anything. So he always kept his nature pure. So based on that pure nature, he always felt a higher power. Just like if somebody grows up in a jungle today and no prophet, no angel, nothing but came to them, and nothing, if you ask them, they always feel a higher power. This pure nature goes away when people are exposed to other ideologies and they read books and they hear things, and then people lose their original pure nature. So Prophet Muhammad had this pure nature, and that in Islam there's a word called Hanif, and that's what he was basically. And then in his late 30s, in spite of all the popularity that he had among the people and everybody loved him, and he was like the most popular man in the village and city, he was extremely concerned about his society. And he was always looking at the sky and saying that there must be a solution for my society. Always looking at the skies, that the creator of this universe must have something, some solution for us. Look at all these injustices, look at all these immoralities, look at all these wars, look at all these slavery, look at all these, how women are treated in our society, how masters are treating their slaves, and all the bloodshed and everything. He was extremely concerned, and he was always look for solution. And eventually he started to meditate and go out in the mountains outside of the city and stay there in the cave for several days and nights, and keep talking to this. There must be some solution. There must be something. And it was in those places, in those days, that one night, all of a sudden, an angel shows up in the cave, and the angel, all of a sudden in a human form. That was the way the angel appeared to Jesus, to Mary, mother of Jesus, that gave him the news of the birth of Jesus, and the way it appeared to Moses and others. So the angel showed up, and the angel, gave him these few verses. So, and then for the next 23 years, he continued to receive. But out of these 23 years, he spent the first 13 years in Mecca. And then he migrated from that city. He had to migrate because of the pressure and persecution, and spent the last 10 years in Medina. And there was different situations that we'll talk about later and will relate to Quran also. But all the details of life of Prophet Muhammad are recorded. Prophet Muhammad is the only prophet that we have all kinds of details about his life, because his life was very simple and humane, and no mysteries around his life, and it was very transparent, public, and also his life was full of sacrifices and hardships from very young ages until the end of his life. As all other prophets went through a lot of hardships, and he was a role model and example. He became a role model and example for not only all Muslims but many other people. Take him as an example, and according to Islam, he is the final prophet of God to not only Muslims but the whole humanity. And his teachings and traditions have come to us separate from the Quran. They are called Hadith and Sunnah. That Islam has two sources of knowledge. The primary source is Quran, and the secondary source is the teachings of the Prophet. Now, how the Quran was revealed exactly to Prophet Muhammad? There were two methods. The first method that I already alluded to, that the angel would come all of a sudden in a human form, so it was easy for the Prophet to handle, because if you see the angels in their original form, people can get overwhelmed and scared. And so the angel comes in a human form and talks just like a human, and the Prophet will get it, and he will repeat and repeat, and the Prophet would memorize it, and then he would disappear. So this was one form of revelation. Another form of the revelation that sometimes was happening, that the Prophet, all of a sudden, he would hear some kind of ringing tone in his head, and he would say that the angel is here. The angel is here, and all of a sudden he will get into a very deep mood of concentration, and he will, usually if he's standing, he will sit down. If he is on the back of the horse or the camel would sit down. They will feel so heavy, and even if it's winter, he will sweat, and he will go into a deep mood of concentration. And after a few minutes, they say, I just received another revelation. And then he would dictate it, that the angel brought another revelation for me. So this was the second form. And the second form was kind of difficult on the Prophet. So sometimes in the first and sometimes in the second form. And Quran itself explains that there's a verse of Quran that says that God talks to humanity only in one of three ways. Either through an inspiration, or through an angel, or behind a veil. So inspiration, it can happen to anybody. The prophets usually get inspiration from God. Ideas come to the prophet. Usually dreams of the prophet is all inspiration. And other human beings also can get inspiration. We all can get inspired once in a while from God. You get all of a sudden some hope, some good news, and some dreams that we see usually about future, and that exactly what happened in the future, that dream is always from God, that you get that kind of dream. So that's an inspiration. That's God, how God communicates with human beings. The second method is that he sends an angel, as the angel brought the Quran. And the third, that God would communicate behind a veil. So like God spoke to Moses and behind a veil, that when Moses went to the bushes in the Old Testament that we read, and in Quran, he could not see God, but he heard the voice of God. Prophet Muhammad also, one night when he traveled to the heavens, and God spoke to him. So that's happened to Prophet Muhammad also, and the Prophet Muhammad, all three methods took place. Now, how was Quran collected? The Quran was collected by two methods. First, by memorization. So the Prophet would memorize everything that the angel gives him. A few sentences usually in the beginning was very short revelations. And he would memorize it several times, and then the angel would disappear, and then he would dictate it right away. As soon as the angel disappears, he would dictate it to his companions. And the companions also, most of them became memorizers of Qur'an. They memorized it. And some memorization of Qur'an is required by every Muslim so that they can offer their daily prayers. But the Prophet encouraged people to memorize as much as possible. And the second method of collection of Qur'an was in writing. That among the companions of the Prophet, there were some special companions who were designated based on their qualifications to write the scripture. So about 40, sometimes up to 55 people among the companions have been designated as scribes of Quran. So whenever any of them was available, the Prophet, when he receives, then he would ask him to write it down. And when they write it down, then the Prophet would say, read it back to me, because he cannot read himself. So when they read it again, then he would confirm, yes, you got it correct, or you made a mistake here. And then also the Prophet would recite those new verses in their daily prayers sometimes, so that people can become fresh and all the new recitations become common among the people. So this is the second method. Until today, both methods have been there, that the Quran has been kept in writing and in collection. Hundreds of thousands of people have memorized in every generation until now, and this is very unique. Now, on top of that, every year the Prophet would receive the angel. In the month of Ramadan especially, the Prophet Muhammad would spend the last 10 days in the mosque. In Arabic it's called Takeoff. The Prophet would stay in the mosque for the last 10 days, and the angel would come and review the whole Quran. Whatever has been revealed so far, the angel and the Prophet would go through the whole thing. Whatever has been revealed from the beginning until then, every year, so that there is no mistake, there is no issues. And then in the last year of the life of the Prophet spent 20 days in the mosque, and angel came and did 2 full reviews of the Quran before the Prophet dies, that everybody basically has written and copies and collected in their memories properly, correctly, and all confirmed. So this was in addition to the first method on top of it. Now, how the Quran got compiled. In addition to memorization and writing, now the writing, of course, in those days, there was not much of paper available to write it, but it was written in parchments. Parchments that the Bible was written on, the original forms of Bible, and Jews and Christians had it, and so in the parchments, basically scraps of leather, fine leather, that they would write it, and sometimes on pieces of cloth and others. And at the end of the life of the Prophet, a complete record of all revelations was available in multiple copies by different individuals and the Prophet himself. And then during the time after the Prophet's life, the third caliph of Islam, or the third leader of Islam after Prophet Muhammad, his name is Uthman. In his time, he made additional copies of the Quran available for others, so that people wanted extra copies in other parts of the world, and they had embraced Islam. And one thing that Uthman did, he limited everything to the dialect of Quraysh. Quraysh was the tribe of Prophet Muhammad. When initially Quran was revealed, a word was pronounced sometimes more than one way by different tribes of Arabs. So when Arabs would receive the Quran, everybody would feel like, okay, this is my tribe, this is my dialect, and everybody would connect with it. And now, for Arabs, it was no problem, because everybody knew that it's the same word. For example, here we have word route or route, route 1, route 1. For an English-speaking person, it doesn't matter at all. But a non-English-speaking person would say, wait a minute, should I pronounce it as route or route? No, I want to pronounce it one way. So non-Arabs, they all said, what is this? More than one pronunciation. There were a few words that were accommodating other tribes' dialects. So Uthman, with the agreement of all other companions of the Prophet at that time, they all agreed that we will limit those words only to the way Prophet Muhammad himself and his tribe and dialect was. So that was the only change that happened in his time, and that some words like rout and root, they were limited to one pronunciation in the time of Uthman. And now this gives you an idea of one of the copies of those copies that Uthman made and sent to different parts of the world. This is still there in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, in the museum. And there's another copy of this in Istanbul, Turkey. So we still have some copies of the original copies from the time of Uthman. And of course today you'll see it in this kind of form. The Qur'an usually is printed in a smaller. It's clear history of revelation and collection and compilation. All right, now one important point about the order of Qur'an is that the Qur'an is not organized based on the chronological history. You remember the first few verses that came, those first few verses are not in the first chapter of Qur'an. So those verses are in Surah chapter 96 of Qur'an now. So the way we have it in the Qur'an right now is not based on chronological order. What happened that when the Prophet was receiving the revelation, the angel would also give him a location index, where to put this revelation. And he would tell the scribes to put this revelation behind that revelation that you received 3 months ago or 4 months ago, and it ended with these kind of words. Or put it behind that chapter or before that chapter, and so he would tell where to put it. And in those days, of course, there was no editing tools, so they had just parchments. So they would insert this new parchment here or here or here on the top or on the bottom, based on that order that the Prophet gives them on that stack of parchments that they have. So the order of compilation is not the same as the order of revelation, because the order of revelation was the way it was revealed in time, but the order of compilation is the way we have it in the book right now. Why such a change? Because initially with God was the way we have it now, but God wanted to send it to the Prophet based on the needs of the Prophet, based on the needs of the community. So the Prophet would would tell the angel, now take this page to him. Now take that, because people are asking a question, for example, oh Prophet, if you're a prophet of God, then tell us about this, tell us about that. Then angel would bring that answer to him. Or people would accuse him, oh, you have fabricated the Qur'an, you have just come up with your, people would accuse him, and then another set of verses would come that, how come you guys say that he has made it up? He has grown up in front of you. You are his uncles, you are his cousins. You know that he never had any teacher. You know that he could not even read and write. You know that he has never traveled alone other than 1-2 trips that it's all known to all of you with your uncle. So how could you say that he has made up this? So use your mind, use your logic, and so very specific answers. Revelation would come based on the needs of the society, needs of the community, and issues and additional guidance that Muslims need, and the Prophet and his followers would need. So God wanted to make this book relevant to the situation. That's why God would just send different parts of Qur'an at that time, but then later on, when it was all put together, after 23 years, think about it, it was a harmonious book. That itself was a miracle. That how come, if you put the speeches of somebody who has given the speeches in 23 years, and he put together all the speeches, you would find all kinds of contradictions, all kinds of issues and problems with that. But this book is a very harmonious book and coherent. That itself was a miracle. Now, Also, if you think about the wisdom of it, sometimes when you build something, you use a different order. And then when you use it, we use a different order, right? For example, when this building was built, initially they started with the what? With the foundation, and then the walls, and then the ceilings, and then the doors and windows, and then many other things here, right? But when we use the building, this was the order of building. But when we use the building, we're not gonna go first to the foundation. We're gonna use the doors first to enter the building, right? Even though doors were put much later on. So basically, the Qur'an was ordered based on the needs of Muslims for the rest of the time, needs of human beings. So the first chapter is something that Muslims have to read 20, 30 times a day in the first. And then second chapter, all those daily applications of life. So based on the needs of Muslims for all times, the Qur'an has been ordered. Now, how is Qur'an organized? The time I'm seeing that I'm running almost out of time. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, but I will give you extra time for questions. The Qur'an, is a very unique book with unique arrangements. It is not like human books. Human books usually are organized into chapters and sections and subsections, and then topics and subtopics in a very hierarchical way that we do it. And usually a chapter as a special topic, and then the whole chapter is about that topic. So the title of the chapter usually represents the contents of the chapter. So you have different chapters with different things. Quran is not organized like that. Also, Quran is not organized like other religious books, like Old Testament, New Testament, which starts with the creation of the universe and then goes all the way up to apocalypse and the end of this world. It's not like that. And Quran also does not start with the beginning of life of Prophet Muhammad with his birth and then ends with his death. No. Quran has a completely different structure and organization that if you don't know these points, you can sometimes get confused what is going on here in terms of arrangements of topics and materials. Basically, each Quran are divided into surahs and verses. And when we understand the concept of surahs and verses, then this concept of topics becomes clear. Surah means a chapter. That's the closest word that we have in English. It's not accurate, but it's not the most accurate. And the verse, the other word is ayah, which is translated as verse. Now, each surah of Quran or each chapter of Quran has an opening and an ending. Every chapter of Quran there is an opening and an ending. And also there is a common theme. Sometimes more than one theme, but one main theme. That's the case with every chapter. But most of the chapters, you will see that they are reiterating the main themes of Quran, which are reminders and many other things. You will see them dispersed all around in different surahs. And all kinds of admonitions and reminders are inserted in the middle of every surah. Different things about next life, about oneness of God, about responsibilities, about moral teachings. All these different topics are inserted. And the way Quran was revealed, since it was revealed within 23 years, so sometimes whatever is revealed last year, some additional teachings come next year. Some additional teachings come 5 years later. Also, at every few years, some people now join the Muslim community. So for them now, some revelations come to again teach them or remind them. And also, the way it is organized, that continuously reinforces certain aspects of Islam to you and the teachings. And they all basically support each other, and there is a coherence of goal and purpose and vision that when you read the whole Quran, you will see that commonalities. So the first unit is what's called ayah in Arabic are translated as verse. But actually, the word ayah has three meanings, which is a sign or a miracle or a verse. And basically, an ayah can be a word, just a single word, or a phrase, or a sentence, or a set of sentences. It can be just a word, al-qari'ah, just one word, or a phrase, or a sentence, or a set of sentences. So how do you know that you have reached the end of ayah? Because when you reach the number, you know that the verse is now finished. And there are a total of 6,236 verses in the Qur'an. You may hear a little different number sometimes. Some scholars count this Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim into it and different surahs, and some don't. And then the second unit is surah. You may see the spelling S-U-R-A-R-S-O-O, and that's a chapter. Basically, a surah is a group of verses that are put together under a common name, a title, and a common theme usually. And this name of the surah does not represent necessarily the contents of the surah. The name is usually a symbolic identifier to separate one surah from another surah. Usually that word has been used within the surah, so that's why it is important that we do not translate the Arabic word of the title of the surah, because sometimes it can be confusing. Because when you expect like human books, for example, chapter 2 is called Al-Baqarah. Al-Baqarah, if you translate it, it's the cow. But so if you read that, you say, oh, I'm not interested in the cow. Let me move on to another chapter, you know. You think that the whole chapter is about the cow. No, this is just a name to identify the surah. And the story of the cow during the time of Moses was mentioned only in 4 or 5 verses in one part of the surah. So that doesn't mean that the whole surah is about the cow. There were 286 verses in that chapter. So that's why we say chapter is not an accurate term, because when you hear chapter, you expect that, okay, the topic represents all the contents. Now the sizes of the surahs are also very different. Some, in human books, usually the chapters are equivalent, so you have 30 pages, 20 pages, 10 pages for every chapter. Here, some surahs can be as long as 50, 60 pages. Some surahs can be as short as only 3 verses, which is 1 line or 2 line. So it's a huge difference between the sizes of the surah, and that also makes it different from the chapters. And usually when you open the Qur'an, except the first chapter, the long chapters are in the beginning and the short chapters are towards the end. And the total number of chapters are 114. And when you write it in English, usually you say, 20:23 means chapter 20, verse 23, just like the numbering is used for Bible verses. This is the way we use it in English. In Arabic and other languages, we usually refer to the name of the surah and then the verse number. Now the third unit of the Quran is what's called juz. Juz usually means a part, and Quran is divided into 30 equal parts. So if Quran is printed in 600 pages, so every juz is 20 pages. And that you can easily tell where you are in terms of organization of recitation or memorization, so equal parts. If you're in just 20, you mean that you have finished 2/3 of Quran. If you're in just 10, you're only 1/3 of Quran. And that's very helpful. And why Quran is divided into 30 equal parts? Because of the month of Ramadan, that Muslims recite the whole Quran in the month of Ramadan, and the month of Ramadan 30 days, so one juz per night in 30 nights finish. So Muslims are recommended to read the Quran at least once a year, every year, the whole Quran. Okay, I'll skip some of the titles, but those of you who are interested, we can share the electronic copy of the presentation. The Quran has several names. Other than the word Quran, it's also referred to as a book, as a revelation, and as a distinguisher, and as a reminder, and there's a logical sequence to it. And then what are the contents of Quran? Contents of Quran, the main contents or main topics are a lot of emphasis on the oneness of God. Islam is very sensitive when it comes to oneness of God. It's called Tawheed, and There's no compromise, basically. Don't associate anything or anybody with God. God is completely separate and independent of the whole universe. He's the only creator. Everybody else and everything else are they created, the creatures, and there is no kind of family relation between God and human beings. And so this is a very, very important topic, and there's a lot of emphasis. And usually in the Quran, when this topic of Tawheed comes, example of Abraham comes, because Abraham really set the model for oneness of God. And then after that, all prophets were following his path. That what does it mean to believe in one God only, and worship only one God, and seek help only from one God, and don't pray to anything else or anybody else, don't worship anybody else, anything else, don't depend on anybody else or anything else except one God, the God of the universe, God of everybody. So that's one of the main topics. The other topic is next life, extensive coverage of next life in Quran with very graphic details and all kinds of details of scenarios about next life that no other religious book has that much information about next life. And other beliefs in Islam, angels and books and prophets, all kinds of moral teachings and all kinds of laws, personal law, social law, public law, family law, international laws, and rights and obligations as an individual, as a family member, as a husband, as a wife, as a child, as a citizen, crimes and punishments. All kinds of crimes are listed, and crimes that some of them have punishment in this world, some of them have next world. If the crime is affecting other people, punishment in this world also is there, but if the crime is not affecting others, it's only in next world. And also guidance for Muslims how to deal with other people, other non-Muslims, including people of the book, referring to Jews and Christians. They are called people of the book because Jews and Christians still have some teachings of God according to Islam. They are called people of the book. And then the infidels and the hypocrites, all kinds of non-Muslims, rules of war and peace are some main topic, guidelines for establishing peace treaties, social and economic policies, a lot of stories of other prophets. Some of them I'll share with Bible that we have today, and some more stories that were not in the Bible, and some stories that were, according to Islam, distorted in previous books and revived in Quran and protected. And then also all kinds of reminders of God to humanity about favors of God all the time. Quran is full of it. And then those who accept the Quran, so these are all general for everybody, and those who accept the Quran, then a specific guidance for them, for Muslims who accept this book as book of God, then a special coaching to make them excellent in everything. So the special verses, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O believers, O Muslims, now that you have attained to faith and belief, now what is expected from you, how excellent you should be in every aspect of your life, etc. So these are some of the main topics of Quran. And now in all these topics, the main topic of Quran, or the main purpose of Quran, is what? The guidance of humanity. So Quran is not a book of science or book of history or book of philosophy, even though Quran uses those subjects to make its points, but it's only a book of guidance of humanity. And what does it mean to be a book of guidance? It continuously tells you what are the appropriate thoughts and ideas and actions, and what are the inappropriate actions and ideas and thoughts. What are the different human personalities? What are the different human traits? And what are the consequences? And what are the long-term and short-term benefits of that? Talking about everyone as a person, as a human being, and as a community. And this is a very important point. The Quran appeals to different parts of human character. It talks to your heart. At the same time, it talks to your mind. At the same time, it talks to your intellect. And then at the meantime, it talks to your conscience. At the meantime, it talks to your moral system. So at the same time, you want to cry, and then you also start to think very deeply. And at the same time, it gives you some other emotions, fear, hope, and all kinds of things that no human book can do that, to have all those kinds of impacts in just a few sentences that you read. And that's very unique about Quran. Also, it keeps guiding humanity to how to establish justice, peace, and excellence in every aspect of life, and instructing the readers all the time what is expected of you, what is recommended to you, and what are the consequences. And based on that, Qur'an says, we have revealed to you, God saying to Prophet Muhammad, we have revealed to you the book that explains everything. And it's guidance, mercy, and good news. Guidance and mercy, guidance to everybody, and those who accept it, it becomes a mercy and good news for them, Muslims. Let's see, time. Try to finish soon. So among all the topics of guidance, or we could say that there are four main aspects of guidance of Quran. One category of guidance is about reminders. So continuously Quran reminds human being, who are you? What is life all about? Who is your creator? What are your responsibilities towards your creator? What is this? What's going to happen after this life? So reminders all the time, reminders that human beings need always. And second form of guidance is informing people about all other realities that human beings have no way to learn about unless God tells us, such as unseen realities, talking about the angels that are around us, talking about other creatures, talking about our soul, our spirit that we cannot see and understand, talking about God himself, talking about the next life, talking about the creation of this universe and origin of this universe and life. So all those topics that there's no way that scientists or philosophers or anybody can come up with, Quran that gives us. That's the second kind of guidance. The third kind of guidance is citing signs of God all the time, signs of God in the nature. That Islam says that everything in the universe is a sign of God. The cloud is a sign of God, the rain is a sign of God, the sun, the moon, the day, the night. So every natural phenomena is a sign of God, and everything should lead you to God, to think about the creator of this universe all the time. So it helps people to develop their faith and strengthen their faith all the time, reflecting on the nature. And the fourth is citing historical anecdotes, all the time talking about, giving references to history. That what happened to communities before you, depending on how they reacted towards God and His message, what happened to them, and who were successful, who were failing. So these are the four main sets of guidance in the Quran. And then, what is the relationship of Quran with other scriptures? 4 points basically. Number one, Quran says that this book came from the same source that other books came. So God says, we have revealed to you, that's addressing Prophet Muhammad, we have revealed to you as we revealed to Noah and the messengers after him, Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, Jesus, Solomon, David, all of them. So the same book that we sent to them, now I have sent a book to you. So they all come from the same source. Second point about other scriptures and relationship to Quran, that Quran says that you as believers of Quran must believe in all those other books and all those prophets. Say, we believe in Allah and what was revealed to all these other prophets, Jesus, Moses, everybody. And as a Muslim must believe in Jesus, a Muslim must believe in the book that was given to Jesus originally and to Moses, and all of them. A person stops to be a Muslim if says, I don't believe in Jesus or Moses. And then the third point is that Quran says that it confirms that all the purpose of all these books were the same. They all came to ask people to worship one God. They all came to tell people to establish justice. They all came to tell people to prepare for next life. So the same objective for all these books. And the fourth thing, the Quran says that this book came to revive the original teachings of other prophets. So if the teachings of other prophets were lost or distorted, this book has come to protect it. And we have we have sent down the book to you with truth and confirming and preserving the original teachings of previous prophets. So this is very important, that this basically, these 4 points explains the relationship of Quran with other previous scriptures that came from God. Now, Quran being the final book of God, preservation of it is very important, because the previous books, God had this plan that from the beginning when he created the first human being, Adam and Eve, that we Muslims, Jews, Christians, they all believe, God made sure that no human beings are left without guidance of God to answer all those questions that people cannot find themselves. So God kept sending prophets and messengers and books from time to time all along the history. And God says that I have not left any community of the earth without a prophet. According to Islam, every community received a prophet and a messenger and a book. But some now, they have lost or distorted in such a degree that you may not even think that they received a prophet. So now, God did not prevent previous books to be prevent from distortion, because he had planned to send another book. So every time when the book was distorted, God would send another book, another prophet. But now the final book, when God sent it, this Qur'an, since there is no other prophet or no other book coming, so the preservation of this book is very important. And God said that in addition to basically that what Muslims memorize it in themselves and also put it in writing, God took additional measures to protect this book. For example, he says, indeed, it is we who have sent down this Qur'an, and we will surely guard it from corruption. And another revelation, another statement says that this book basically does not allow any kind of distortions to come into it. And another statement says, O Prophet, do not move your tongue hastily, basically to receive the recitation. It is surely upon us to protect this book, the collection of this book, and the recitation of this book. So this verse basically assured the Prophet, because initially when the Prophet was receiving the angel, he was concerned that maybe after the angel disappears, I will forget what he said. And he was very fast trying to repeat what the angel was saying. He would repeat it. And then this revelation came and told the Prophet that don't worry. We will make sure that every word of Qur'an is planted in your chest, in your memory, in your heart. And you will not forget even one word of it. And everything will be also protected and collected also in writing and in memory. So this basically assured the Prophet, and after this the Prophet was very relaxed when he was receiving the angel. Before this he was very concerned that maybe I'll forget them. And then additional statements that basically says that there's no doubt in this book that it's completely protected and preserved. And also there's empirical evidence for this. You know, if you go around the world today, there's only one single text of Qur'an in its original language, Arabic. And if you go to Library of Congress, you go to any other library here and other places, if you ask for original Arabic text, there's only one single text. And that, you wonder, you know, especially when you look at the condition of Muslims today, if it was up to the Muslims, it would not have been the case, right? If you look at the Muslims' condition today, they are so divided. There are so much differences. There are so much fightings between different countries and people. If it was up to Muslims, you would have hundreds of different versions of Quran, right? Because every country might have come with their own version. And within the country, for example, in Afghanistan, you may see Taliban having their version of Quran, Al-Qaeda their own version of Quran, and ISIS others their own version of Quran. You know, everybody would have come up with their own version of Quran just to justify their positions and to say we are right, you know. But God really protected this book from any changes, and until today, there is only one single text in the whole world. In 1400 years, so that says that this is beyond the Muslims. This is a favor to the whole humanity that God has saved such a book that protects the teachings of Moses, Jesus, and all other prophets, and we have such a book available. Because of, I know I have much more materials to cover for you, and I'll just quickly skip through some topics. The sound of Quran is a very important thing. So Muslims not only use the Quran for guidance, but use it for soothing, for relaxation. Muslims, when they get upset, frustrated, they listen to Quran, and recitation brings a lot of soothing. So a lot of Muslims have their own, their own favorite reciters. So it's just like others, they listen to songs. Muslims listen to Quran whenever they are, they want to get some both rewards and relaxation and everything. And there are all kinds of recitations, but because of time, we'll hold on later. If we have time, we'll recite some of them because we already got some flavor. Now, Quran is a very unique book compared to some other religious books that continuously emphasizes on the reader to think, to reflect, to visualize, not just read passively. And Quran condemns people who just read the Quran passively without thinking. It's very interesting. Quran says those who read the Quran and they don't think, or they're locks in their hearts, or they're locks, they have locked their hearts, they don't want to know what they are reading. So it's always emphasizes to think, and always asking you, don't you think, don't you see, don't you reflect? A lot of reminders. Okay, so translations, we said Quran was translated into other languages later on based on the needs, but Muslims said, let's make a difference between Quran and the translations. And then also explanations of Quran became common, but the translations in English language is interesting. The translations of English became available much later, about 1,000 years later. For the first time in 17th century, the first English translation took place. And then another 3-4 translations of English was done in English, but the first 5 translations until 20th century were all very much distorted. These 5 translations between 17th century and 20th century, they are the initial cause of a lot of misunderstandings about Islam in English-speaking countries, because there were all kinds of intentional distortions in those first initial translations of Quran. People who translated them, unfortunately, they were not objective, they were not doing it scholarly, but they were very hostile to it, and they could not hide their hostility. They would say in the beginning of their introduction that, oh reader, please pay attention, this book is not book of God, this was crafted by Prophet Muhammad, and so how could you say that? As a scholar, you should just translate it and leave it for people to judge the book. So why don't you leave that? So unfortunately, this was the case with the initial translations of Quran, and until 20th century, that for the first time Muslims themselves started to translate the Quran, and then until now we have 50 or more translations of Quran. And for me, this is my favorite topic, because for 4 years I was just comparing different translations for my PhD thesis to see all the differences of different translations. So translations of Quran, you may find a lot of distorted translations and all kinds of issues with it. It's important that you look at an authentic translation. And I'm giving here a set of recommended English translations of Quran that in this table, this column gives the name of the translator. This is the title of translation. This is the year of publishing and place, and some commentary, some comments about it. Translations meant for different people. For example, those people who have Bible background, these 2 translations are very good for him, Yusuf Ali and Muhammad Pickthall, because it uses kind of King James version of Bible English, very archaic, very kind of ancient English. But for youth and others, these translations are difficult to understand, heavy English. More modern English would be in these translations and authentic. So depending on the background of the person, you could use different translations, and it's important that we use the translations that can be easy to understand and also faithful to the original meaning and authentic. Commentaries of Quran are important because a lot of issues and problems these days Muslims face. Some of it is because of some distorted commentaries that people have understood some verses and they are doing some crazy things. So it's important to study a trustworthy commentary of Quran. And commentary of Quran started with Prophet Muhammad himself. when Prophet Muhammad sometimes was asked by companions, "What do you, oh Prophet, can you explain what does this verse mean, or what's the relationship of this verse with this other verse, or why this verse tells us this and that?" Then the Prophet would give explanations. So his explanations basically started this science of commentary or science of tafsir. And then among the companions of the Prophet, there were some special students of tafsir, and right now we have all kinds of commentaries of Qur'an, some very focused on certain areas like philosophy or linguistic aspects of Qur'an or scientific aspects of Qur'an, and some with very general, and some classic, some modern tafsir.
We have around a few minutes left until 1 o'clock. You want to take Q&A if anyone has questions, or you can continue.
12:30, that's right. Yeah, so and this slide is basically, 1 minute, finish. This slide is about benefits of tafsir, that it's so important to read the Quran with tafsir, because without tafsir you will a lot of times don't know what to talk about. And this, I'm just giving an example of a surah of chapter with translation and tafsir. And then it's important to know the role of the Prophet and tafsir. That Prophet, the Quran came to him, so you have to refer to the Prophet, how he applied the verses and what he explained about it. And then another science of Quran, that some surahs were revealed in Mecca and some in Medina. What are the differences in terms of focus, in terms of topics? And then the scientific knowledge of Quran is another topic that we don't have time to cover, but if you ask questions, I'll explain. So, yes, time for your questions, please. And I'm sorry I went a little longer. Come on, don't be shy. Yes?
Beginning of your speech, you mentioned that Muhammad was orphaned at 6 and not know his parents.
I missed the last sentence.
That Muhammad was orphaned at 6 and not know his parents.
Yeah, his father died before he was born. So when his mother was pregnant, his father died. But his mother also died at the age of 6.
So how do you know his lineage?
How do we know what?
Lineage.
Oh, his grandfather, his uncles were there, right? So after his mother died, grandfather took care of him. And grandfather of Prophet was one of the leaders of the tribe, so he was well known to everybody. The grandfather, the paternal grandfather, was a leader of Mecca, and he was a very popular man. And then the uncles of the Prophet were also famous leaders, so everybody knew the whole family. And he was raised by his uncle later on. Yes?
Yeah, I wanted to know why Allah says we in the Quran.
Yeah, sometimes Allah, God, when He refers to Himself in the Quran, sometimes He say I, sometimes He say we, or sometimes He refers to Himself as He, or He, He is mentioned. So why I or we? It's interesting if you look at the verses of Quran. There's a common theme that whenever God speaks about His powers, His majesty, and His kingdom, and the universe, He will say we. But whenever He speaks about His mercy, His one-to-one relationship, kindness, He say I. And that's consistent across the whole Quran. And that's also called royal language, speaking as like kings or leaders who speak, we do this, we do this. So that word we doesn't mean that there was somebody else with God. So we created this world, He Himself created, and nobody else was with Him. So the word we does not mean plural. It's only one God.
Where is the closest thing in the English translation? The meaning is maybe not.
No, in Arabic also we have we. Yes.
How was the order of the surahs in Quran determined? Because the revelation was in a different order than is presented in the current text.
Yeah.
Correct?
Did you come late?
Oh, I must have missed it.
Yeah. We explained it here. that basically the Prophet was receiving a location index for every new surah or new passage that he was receiving, that where to put it. And he would tell the scribes that, put this new revelation after that revelation or this revelation. So based on the parchments that they had, they would just insert it in different spots. So that would come from God himself. And angel would say, and at the end, when it was all full harmonious book, that was really a miracle itself. So the order of organization of Quran is today, or compilation, is not the same as the order of revelation. Good. What else? Do you think you know enough about the Quran that you can find your way into it? I can say a little bit about the scientific knowledge also, and think about any questions. Please do not hesitate to stop me and ask questions. Any questions? Or should I continue with? Yes.
Are you guys making this a lot here? Or?
Later.
Later.
We have time. Now, Quran is considered a miraculous book in many ways. First of all, every prophet showed miracles. Every prophet of God showed miracles. Why? Because they had needed to prove that they have a divine source. Otherwise, how would people trust them that you're a prophet? So they had to show miracles, and God helped them to show miracles. And the miracles were usually relevant to the situation and life of the community around them. So the miracles of Moses were usually related to magic and many other things in those days. Jesus' miracles was mainly related to health and to spirituality, reviving spirituality. And during the time of the Prophet, there was other things also. But Prophet Muhammad showed many miracles, but the biggest miracle of Prophet Muhammad is the Quran. The Quran itself says that people would come and ask, if you're a prophet of God, show us miracles. Show us miracles. All the time they would challenge him. And then God says, are they asking for a bigger miracle than this miracle of Quran? Isn't this enough for them to believe in you that you're a prophet of God? That you could not even read and write a book, and you could never have any teacher on it or anything, and now you have such an important book talking about everything, about the universe, about the details of next life, about in a very coherent and systematic way, and all of this. Isn't this enough for them to believe in you? And they know that you knew nothing about Jesus, about Moses, about their teachings, about all the teachings that came to them, and now we are giving you all these teachings. Isn't that big enough or a miracle for you, for them? So this is considered also a living miracle, meaning that at any time through the history of humanity, people can verify that the recipient of this book is prophet, because the purpose of miracles was to prove prophethood, right? All prophets showed miracles so that they prove that they are prophets of God. How you can do that through the Quran, and how it becomes a living miracle? Because if you read the Quran, and if you really read it with some good attention and with an open mind, a person can easily conclude that this is not a book of human being. He can easily conclude that this is not written by Muhammad, because the way it addresses Muhammad himself, it criticizes him, it gives him ideas, it gives him recommendation, it gives them, you can easily tell that the author of this book must be someone above this universe, above this people, and all that. So at any time you can conclude that this book, the recipient of this book must have been a prophet of God. That's how it's a living miracle for all times. And also it's miracle in terms of its linguistic aspects, the excellence, the literary excellence of the Quran is so superb that anybody has a little knowledge of Arabic, they can tell. The contents of Quran is a miracle in terms of covering of different topics, the logic of it, the consistency of it, that there is no contradiction. Quran challenges the reader, says, if you have doubts about this book, then try to find one discrepancy. If this was not book of God, you would have seen all kinds of discrepancies in this book. because the history of it was within 23 years of the speeches. So find one discrepancy and come forward and audit this book. And that's also a miracle aspect of it. And preservation of this book is a miracle, that how it was preserved for the last 1400 years. And the scientific knowledge of it is especially as a miracle of this book, that especially today that it's the age of science and technology, that how Qur'an had all this scientific knowledge, because Arabs in those days were living with all kinds of superstitious thoughts. They had strange thoughts about the nature, about the universe, about human life. Qur'an not only corrected them, but introduced new ideas about the life, about the universe and the nature. And also there's a thesis basically that the nature is the work of God, and the Qur'an is the word of God. So God created the nature, the universe, and God sent this word. The word of God and the actions of God cannot contradict with each other. If this is the word of God, and if that's the nature is the work of God, then they better synchronize. And that's why Islam and proper scientific inquiry can work together and come up with a common result. Because usually when people go into one of two extremes, they will find discrepancies between religion and science. Either when religion is mixed with all kinds of myths and mythology and all that, then of course science that would not accept all those myths and all that, and tales and legends and all that, which has no basis. And the other possibility is when science crosses its own limits. Science is a great tool, but it has its own limits. What are the limits of science? Science can only address the physical world. Science can only address the tangible world. Science is not meant to address other realities of life. Science never talks about angels. Science never talks about the soul. Science never talks about next life. It's not the subject of science. So we should not use science for those kind of things. And some people try to use the science to disprove God. They use science to disprove angels, and that's a wrong use of science. It's taking advantage, basically forwarding their own agenda under the name of science. Otherwise, science does not say anything itself against God or anything. Science, Islam and Quran would not have any contradictions with science. However, in science we have two areas. We have proof in facts and we have theories. If it's proof in fact, no problem at all. It's haq. If it is theories and hypotheses, Quran may agree with it or may not agree with it, because theories keep changing and scientists themselves change theories. Also, Quran has about 700 verses that talks about the sciences of cosmic nature and human life. And that's more than 10% of Quran. And basically, Quran says every natural phenomena is a sign of God. Every rain, cloud, sun, day and night, everything. So basically, you can say that the word ayah is interesting. It means sign of God. It also means verses of the book. So the signs of God in the nature, if you study them properly, and if you study these signs of God in the book as verses, they cannot contradict. They would come up with the same conclusion if you have proper scientific inquiry. Also, Islam encourages scientific approach. How? Because science is based on two principles. One principle is observation, the other is experimentation. And Islam, Quran, you will see that it emphasizes so much on both of these principles. For example, Quran talks about honey, iron, animals, many things, and Quran continuously, that's experimentation. Before that, about observation, Quran continuously asks the reader to reflect, to look at the universe, to see, to make observations all the time in a very systematic way. And then also experimentation. Like, Quran says that in the honey there is shifa, there is healing for people. So now it prompts the reader that, oh, there's healing. If anybody is now into health sciences, they would say, let me check, let me try this, that how honey gives healing. Or if you Quran talks about iron, that there's a lot of benefits in iron, there's a lot of power in iron. So now anybody with industrial engineering mind say, okay, let me try the iron and take it to the lab and mold it and see what and all the benefits of iron today, and transportation and military, everything. So all of that experimentation comes. So these two principles are always in the Quran, and that's why Quran says we will show them, we'll show mankind our signs and patterns in the horizon and inside themselves until it becomes clear to them that this revelation is the revelation of God, and it's coming with the truth. And that's really interesting. So some examples of scientific knowledge of Quran. For example, God says that about the initial creation of the universe. God says the universe was in the state of smoke. And now science tells us that the universe was in a gaseous state, hot gases. And exactly, smoke is the most beautiful word for hot gases. It's gas and it's hot. And also, Quran says that the heavens and the earth, they were all together. They were all together, and we split them apart. So that's what Big Bang Theory is about today, right? Big Bang Theory tells us that the whole universe was created as a result of an explosion. But the problem with Big Bang Theory is that or some people, they claim that Big Bang Theory happened by itself. But God says, no, I made it happen. The sun and the moon and the earth, they were all together, and we split them apart. So that, think about it, 1400 years ago, who could talk about Big Bang? Who could talk about the universe, that they were one joint entity, the sun and the earth and the moon, they were all together. And now, in the last few decades, we are learning about this. So what this knowledge from where Prophet Muhammad got it. Or Quran talks about the expansion of the universe, that God says that we are continuously expanding the universe. And now we are learning about this, and people got Nobel Prizes 2-3 years ago that they established this fact that the universe is expanding. So, but God said it 1400 years ago. Or Quran talks about the waves and the paths in the heaven, that God says, that the heavens are full of all the paths and waves. And all now through our cell phones and all the basically wiring that exists in the air and in the heavens, it's our technology now works because of this wiring in the air and basically wireless. And Quran said it 1400 years ago, and Quran said that the universe was created in a systematic order, and also the sun, the moon, the earth, they are all moving around their orbits. This concept of orbits and everything in a counted and calculated manner, moving, this is, can you imagine 1400 years ago, who could understand this kind of details of the universe? And Quran talks about the stages of the growth of the baby in the womb of the mother. In those days, there was no ultrasound, and no one knew what was going to happen inside the mother's body. And the Quran gives very detailed stages that now the people who are into the field of studying the womb of the mother, in medicine, they have concluded that, many of them have concluded that Quran not only is a book of religion, but it's a book of science also.
To change your life, calling you to see the truth.